Hello and welcome to another video in my video series, A Brief History of Female Artists. In this YouTube series, I want to talk about female artists who have been influential in our art history, and this week I want to talk about Louise Bourgeois. So Louise Bourgeois was born in 1911 in Paris, in France. Her family owned a tapestry business, and so Bourgeois would spend a lot of her time as a child helping to restore the old tapestries sold in the shop by drawing in the missing pieces of the figures and patterns in the tapestry. In 1922, the family hired a British au pair who would help Bourgeois and her siblings to learn English. Later on, her father started an affair with this au pair, which came to deeply affect Bourgeois, and the feelings she got of betrayal from her father stayed with her for the rest of her life. Bourgeois was a gifted student, and in 1930 she started to study mathematics and geometry. She liked the feeling that math and geometry brought into her life, and she has said, "I got peace of mind only through the study of rules nobody could change." However, after the death of her mother in 1932, Louise Bourgeois decided to study art and abandon mathematics. She had an interest in seeing the process which art was made, and so she visited many studios all over Paris and also helped assisting during their exhibitions. After opening a print shop next to her father's print studio, Bourgeois met her future husband Robert Goldwater, who was an American art professor. Together they moved to New York in 1938. They had 3 sons together and remained married until his death in 1973. In America, Louise Bourgeois continued her art education at the Art Students League of New York. She struggled to adapt to her new country, and she also found it difficult to enter the art scene of New York. In 1947, she created an art book that contained 9 engravings titled "He Disappeared into Complete Silence." The engravings are mostly of buildings, as Bourgeois was quite taken by the massive skyscrapers that she saw when she came to New York. And then she turns them into these little figures that tell a story as you make your way through the book. She also wrote the accompanying text, and this piece talks about not only her loneliness that she felt when she left France and her whole family behind, but also of feelings of fear and anger. During the 40s, Bourgeois would start to turn to sculpting, and she would create sculptures using wood and scraps that she found in a junkyard. By making the pieces distressed by punching holes in them and scratching them, Bourgeois talks about her feelings of betrayal and trauma. The sleeping figure is one example, and Bourgeois described the sculpture as a war figure that cannot face the world and is defensive. This figure is sculpted to be thin and narrow, and it's showing us how vulnerable this figure is, but it's still keeping their armor up as trying to protect themselves from something. In 1951, Louise Bourgeois' father died, which made her fall into a deep depression. Bourgeois was fairly quiet for the following years, but in 1964 she held her first solo exhibition in 11 years. The art pieces she showed in this exhibition was very different from her earlier work that were mostly made out of wood, and these ones were made out of latex and plaster and were more organic and strange looking. The quartered one is one piece from this collection, and it's a strange looking sculpture that hangs like a pendulum. It is reminiscent of maybe some sort of animal or carcass or something. Bourgeois described these sculptures as layers, and she has described them as being seclusion and rest, but the security of the layer can also be a trap. So she's showing us some contradictions with these kinds of work, and her work was praised mostly by younger artists who were very interested in her work because they liked the way her art was talking about different psychological states. Bourgeois became friends with many other influential artists, such as Willem de Kooning, Jackson Pollock, and Mark Rothko. She made artworks from bronze, marble, and plaster, and she often talked about emotions such as fear, vulnerability, and a feeling of losing control in her art practice. Louise Bourgeois also rejected the idea that her art was feminist. She often included the female body in her artworks, femme maison, torso self-portrait, arc of hysteria, being a few examples, but claimed that the emotions that she portrayed in these pieces were genderless. She has said, "My work deals with problems that are pre-gender. For example, jealousy is not male or female." Bourgeois still became a feminist icon, and in 1976, her piece Femme Maison was featured on the cover of Lucy Lippard's book From the Center, Feminist Essays on Women's Art. In 1973, Louise Bourgeois' husband dies. The same year, she started to teach at various different schools and colleges, and she would also hold gatherings in her home in Chelsea for young artists and students. She would critique their work, and because of her ruthlessness and her dry sense of humor, these gatherings would be called Sunday Bloody Sunday. In 1974, she created her piece called The Destruction of the Father. This piece was a sort of revenge fantasy aimed towards her father, as Bourgeois tried to come to terms with her feelings towards him. She has said that he often bragged and gloated at the dinner table, and so the piece depicts a life-size dinner table placed into a space that looks like a cave or maybe even a womb. On the table there are actual body parts of a lamb, as well as flesh-colored forms that are meant to look like dismantled body parts. The scene is then lit with red lighting that gives us a feeling of anger, death, and blood. Bourgeois has said about this piece, "The children grabbed him and put him on the table, and he became the food. They took him apart, dismembered him, ate him up, and so he was liquidated, the same way he liquidated his children. The sculpture represents both a table and a bed." In 1994, Bourgeois installed her first large-scale spider at the Brooklyn Museum. The spider had already been a returning theme in a lot of her artworks. In 1947, she made a charcoal drawing of a spider, but then came to be featured more in her artworks and sculptures in the 1990s. The body of the spider consists of a cage-like structure in which a white egg is being held, protected inside by the steel cage. She's drawing a parallel to the maternal, and in 1995 she wrote a poem titled Ode to My Mother, where she relates the spider to her own mother. She thought that her mother was strong, and by comparing her to the spider, she's drawing a parallel between spinning, weaving, nurturing, and protecting. She has said, "The spider is an ode to my mother. She was my best friend. Like a spider, my mother was a weaver. Like spiders, my mother was very clever. Spiders are friendly presences that eat mosquitoes. We know that mosquitoes spread diseases and are therefore unwanted, so spiders are helpful and protective, just like my mother." So Louise Bourgeois has made many different versions of this spider in various different sizes. Maman is a 10-meter high sculpture made from bronze and marble, depicting this spider. Louise Bourgeois continued to make artworks all until her death in 2010, her last art piece being completed just a week before she died. She is known as one of the most influential female artists of her time, and her work has been celebrated for its highly personal thematic content depicting themes of trauma, betrayal, fear, loneliness, and anxiety, just to name a few. So that is it for this brief history of Louise Bourgeois. I really hope you enjoyed this video, and if you have any suggestions for other female artists that you would like me to do a video about, just leave a comment down below. If you want to see more videos, please subscribe. If you like this video, make sure you also give it a like, and I will see you again next time. Bye!